Okay, let's start Tashima right on the top of Lamed Hey Lamed Base, 35B at the top, the second line. We thank Hashem that you're able to learn Torah every day. It's the rest of our learning Hashem based in English immediately. Okay, so for Shlema, for our needs, father and Naftali Ben Menachem. Okay. We had a statement. Well, the Mishnah discussed if someone has intention of sacrificing slaughtering the sacrifice to eat something that's not normally eaten, which means because it's supposed to be burnt and he has intention to eat it, it's not going to make it piggle. But to burn something that's supposed to be eaten, it's not going to make it piggle. Then we had things that weren't actually part of the sacrifice also. He has intention to eat the fetus or something like that. That won't make it piggle either. However, came along Rabbi Lazar in the Gemara and says that those things, the fetus actually will become piggle, not if you have intention to eat the fetus out of it a lot of time, but if you have intention to eat the sacrifice out of a lot of time, fetus will get joined along with that, it will become piggle. Same with some other things as well, that it's theoretically possible that those things, even though they can't make piggle, but they could become piggle. The same was with the imurim regarding the parim hanisrafim, the carbon chatayis that are brought outside, that the blood is sprinkled inside, but the flesh is burnt outside. The Beis Hadeshen, those can only become piggle. The only way that they could become piggle, not if you think about the flesh, because the flesh isn't eaten, but if you would think about the imurim, which are burnt on the altar, those imurim could, if you have intention to eat the imurim to burn the imurim after the allotted time, they would invalidate, they would make piggle the whole sacrifice. But if you have intention about the rest of the sacrifice, the flesh, then it won't affect the imurim. So in other words, there's things that could work one way, but not the other way. That was Rabbi Lazar's chiddush. Okay, Tashma, come and listen. We'll start on the top over here of 35. The Param Hanisrafim, Lasir Hanisrafim. These types of sacrifices, which are they're entirely burnt. There's no flesh that's eaten. It says Mayel Mehem Mishuk Tishu. You can violate the rules of Me'ilah, which is getting personal benefit from consecrated items, once they've been sanctified. Once the animal's been consecrated, then the laws of Me'ilah kick in, and if someone has personal benefit from it, so that would be the violation. You have to bring the sacrifice if it was by mistake. Carbon Me'ilah, etc. Well, Nishchetu, once they're shechted, these sacrifices, Huchsheru. Huchsheru is the term that's used to make something susceptible to tumah. When something gets wet, food gets wet, okay, now it could become tumah. So here we're saying Huchsheru, once it's been slaughtered, now it becomes susceptible, lipasal b'tful yaim, to become invalid. Lipasal is a type of tumah. If someone touches it, it's a tumah that doesn't spread. But full yaim, someone that went to the mikveh but didn't wait for nightfall, if he touches it, but or if it was touched by someone that didn't bring a sacrifice yet, and so therefore wasn't allowed to have contact with the sacrifices, ubelina, or if it's left overnight. Now, the Gemara understands that lina, left overnight, means that if it's left overnight, but also if it has thoughts of leaving it overnight, the same thing would apply. Now, thoughts of leaving it overnight by the shechita, we're saying now would invalidate the sacrifice. It would make it piggle. My love, linas basar. Thoughts of what? 1 second. This is a sacrifice that's never eaten because it's entirely burnt. Where's it burnt? Not even on the altar, it's burnt outside. So we were saying that what's burnt outside doesn't have the loss of pigul. If he has thoughts about that. So what is he thinking about? Linas basar. He leaves the flesh overnight. Shmamina migu the pasta belina pasta v'machshava. Turns out that this is a proof to Rebbe Lazar. Yeah. It's a proof that it's possible to have pigul by the Paramanisrafim, which would be, according to Rebbe Lazar, which would be that he had thoughts of what would he leave overnight. So Rashi explains over here, if he has thoughts about the basar itself, about the flesh itself, then that's impossible, because that's something that's not eaten. And we said in the Mishnah that only thoughts about things that are eligible to be eaten out of the allotted time will become pigul. But things that are not eligible to be eaten anyway, even if thoughts of eating it out of the allotted time, so that won't work. So it must be that we're talking about that the machshava of leaving over the limbs, the organs, the organs of which are normally burnt on the inner altar. And here as well, they're burnt on the inner altar. But he decides he's going to burn it a day later. Now, either he actually does that, or he thinks that he's going to do it at the time of the shechita. So that would make the entire sacrifice pigul. And that would be a proof to Rebbe Lazar. Rebbe Lazar was the one that says that you can make pigul even though something can't become pigul. You can even something that doesn't become pigul one way, but it could make pigul the opposite way. So over here, if he has thoughts about eating the flesh, it won't make the organs pigul. But if you have thoughts about the organ, it would make the flesh pigul. That's what we're seeing from this. The Gemara says, "Loi lina semurim." Lina semurim. We're not talking about the making the flesh pigul. We're talking about the organs are becoming are staying overnight, but not the organs. He's thinking that the organs are going to stay overnight, but not that they should now make the flesh pigul. But the organs will stay overnight, and he's thinking they themselves will become pigul themselves, but not the flesh. That was an answer that the Gemara used before when we tried to prove that Rebbe Lazar is correct. We said no. There is a possibility that even if the organs can't make the flesh pigul, and not like, in other words, not like Rabbi Elazar, but nevertheless they could still make themselves pigul. So okay, and that's what the Gemara is giving that answer again over here. The Gemara says, 1 second, if you're talking about only the organs becoming pigul and not the flesh becoming pigul, which would not be like Rabbi Elazar, Hamidik Tani Seifa, but because it says in the Seifa, it means later on in this brisa, it says, Kulan Ma'ilam Bam Al Beisadeshin. All of them, there's still Me'ila still applies, Ad Shita Chabasar, until the flesh, what's Yitach? Until it melts, until it dissolves. What is it called? Charred? Really? It sounds like it turns into like a fluid. Interesting. Okay. Until it's charred, he says. So, which means that we're dealing with the flesh. We're not dealing with the limbs. It says Michlal Dereisha Linas Basar. If we're talking about the flesh, right? When it came to Me'ila, how long does Me'ila apply to the sacrifice? As long as the flesh is still intact. Once the flesh is charred, so then the Me'ila doesn't apply. So we're talking about the flesh. That means when we're talking about pigul, we're talking about the flesh also. Of course, the same thing. So, well, it seems like that the answer that we gave, that we're dealing with the organs themselves and not the flesh, doesn't fit with the context. Gemara says, "Midi area, do you have to grab it like that? You don't have to say that just because one part of the brisa is talking about the flesh, that means the whole brisa is talking about the flesh. Could be the beginning is talking about the limbs, and the end of the brisa is talking about the flesh, the organs, and the end of the brisa is talking about the flesh. Maseches Rabba. Rabba has a question. The following are items that don't become pigul and they don't make pigul. I'm sorry, they don't make pigul and they don't become pigul. What does that mean, make pigul and become pigul? Make pigul means that if you have thoughts of those eating those items themselves, the entire sacrifice, out of the allotted time, the entire sacrifice will become pigul. What does it mean doesn't become pigul? It means you have thoughts about other parts of the sacrifice would make that this part of the sacrifice should also be pigul, right? We don't say the following, nothing, there's no pigul at all, not to cause and not to be affected. He has thoughts of burning the hair that's on top of the sheep, on top of the head of the sheep. Now, it turns out that the head of the sheep is not skinned, so there is hair on it when it's put on the altar. If he has thoughts of burning that hair, that's not going to make pigul. The goatee, the hair on the goat's beard. If he has thoughts of burning that out of its allotted time, or the hide, or the I guess the liquid that comes out of it. Reitiv means gravy. Kipa we said was the spices and the pieces on the bottom of the pot. But Allah we said was the vein in the neck. Amura is the crop, that's part of the bird. Vatsamis in the bones. Vagidim are the other sinews. Vakarnayim are the horns. Vatafayim and the hoofs. Vashlil, fetus. Vashilia is the afterbirth, the placenta. V'chalav hamikdashim, and the milk of the female animals that would still be in the udder at the time of the slaughtering. Beitzei tayrim, or the eggs of the birds. Kulan, all of them. Leimefaglim. I guess the eggs, even if they're still inside. They don't make pigul and they don't become pigul. Oh, it just repeats it. Look at that. It doesn't. You're not chayav from eating it as pigul, or if it's left over, or if it's tummy. It's not part of the sacrifice itself. And if someone offers these outside the temple, he's pater, because it's not part of the sacrifice. Sacrifices need to be in the temple. This is not part of it. My love, is it not? Comes out, what does it mean? These things, one of the things mentioned here was the shlil, the fetus. Saying the fetus does not become pigul and doesn't make pigul. 1 second. That doesn't fit with Rabbi Lazar. Rabbi Lazar said before that if he has thoughts about the sacrifice, the fetus does become pigul. The way Rashi explained it before, the way we learned yesterday, was he holds uber yerachimai, that the fetus is one of the limbs of the mother. So if the mother becomes pigul, then this would also become. So why, if he has thoughts about the shlil, will it not make the mother, the whole animal pigul if it's part of the animal? He said that's because it wasn't really edible. So it doesn't make pigul, but it would become pigul. So here we have a contradiction to that, because here we're saying that the shlil doesn't make or become. So the Gemara says loy. No, that's not the pshat. They won't make the zevach, won't make the korban pigul, and they also won't make pigul because of themselves. So really, ihachi. Second, if that's the case, why do you have to say again a second time? The way this brisa started off, it says ve'elu shein mefaglim ve'en mispaglim. Following, don't make pigul and don't become pigul. Then it concludes, all of these don't make pigul and don't become pigul. Why do you have to repeat it again if it doesn't really include everything? There's all the time, according to you, ain't chayav malisham pigul. When you said that you're not chayav because of pigul, hasulamli, why do you have to repeat that? And basically it says 3 times here that there's no pigul. I did the bailamistni. Nice for tummy. Really, what I wanted to say was that there's no nicer in tummy. There's no leftover laws of leftover meat or the laws of impure won't apply. So because once it does that, it says pigul as well along with it. Oh, so it's just doing a derech hagav, just listing it, like sometimes it says cheir sheit v'katan. We don't really mean all three. It's just that's the expression that you have. So because over here pigel nicer tummy goes together, so it says wanted to say nicer tummy, it threw in pigel as well. Hachanami, I did the bailam misim malam b'chutz. So tananami v'kulam mifaglam. Also, I wanted to say that if you bring it up outside the temple, you're going to be exempt. So it also said that there's also no pigel in it, but we didn't really mean to include also the shlil will not become pigel. Rava says, Afanan amitanin, I can prove that this is correct. Because it says, someone slaughters, we learned it in our Mishnah, someone slaughters a sacrifice with intention to eat the fetus or the afterbirth outside of its allotted time, late pigel, it doesn't become pigel. If he does malika on the bird, which means he uses his fingernail to do shchita, and at that time he has thoughts of eating the eggs outside of its allotted time, late pigel, he doesn't create pigel. And then it goes on, it says, if you notice, it says there's two items that are not chayiv because of pigel. What is that? The milk that's left in the udder after it's sacrificed, or the birds, or the eggs that are in the birds. You're not chayiv because of pigel nicer and tummy. Problem is, it left out some examples. Hashlil v'shelya chayavin. When it came to the shlil, it doesn't say that. When it talks about the fetus, it left it out. And that was part of the original examples. So why did it leave it out at the end? Rather, the reason why I left it out is because it's coming to tell me that there is a possibility that the fetus does become pigel, and this would fit with what Rabbi Elazar is saying, is that if he has thoughts about the actual sacrifice, then to eat it out of the allotted time, then the shlil, the fetus, would be joined into the pigel. If the entire sacrifice becomes pigel, then the fetus would become pigel along with it. Okay. That was the sugya of Rabbi Elazar.
Amen.
I don't think so. I think this is Rabbi Elazar, who is the Amira, or Bless Ben Pedas. Hill was asking if this Rabbi Elazar is Rabbi Kiva's teacher, who was Rabbi Eliezer ben Hyrcanus. I don't think so. It says Rabbi Elazar. Usually that would be Rabbi Eliezer. Usually that would be quoted in a brisa or a mishnah. Here it's just the Gemara talking, so it's usually the Amira. Okay, Tanan Hassam. We learned over there Bali Mumin. We're talking about now. There's a halacha that if a sacrifice is invalid, but it's brought on the altar anyway, you don't take it down. Small invalidations, you don't take it down. We learned this before. Unless it was totally invalid from before entering the courtyard. So Bali Mumin, if it had a blemish that made it not eligible to be a sacrifice, so even if it's put on the altar, you take it down because that blemish came before it came into the temple. Rabbi Akiva machsher b'Bali Mum. Rabbi Akiva says no. If it's a balmum, you can leave it up. If it was has a blemish and it was brought on the altar anyway, you leave it there. You don't take it down. Okay. Amar Rabbi Chia Barabba, Rabbi Yechanan, Rabbi Chia Barabba is the famous student of Rabbi Yechanan. He says in his teacher's name, when does Rabbi Kiva say that a blemish is not so bad, you can still leave it up? It's talking about only a specific type of blemish that was like a cut in the eye, on the eyelid, that would not invalidate, it's not a missing limb, would not invalidate an actual animal sacrifice. It would not invalidate a bird sacrifice. So therefore, when it comes to an animal sacrifice, even though it does invalidate it, but you can still leave it up. You don't have to take it out, take it off. Like okay, this isn't. We shouldn't have had this here anyway, and you take it off the altar. You don't do that. You leave it on the altar because it was eligible if it would have been a bird. It wouldn't. It's not so invalid. Who shakadam ekdeshes mumam, and that only is if the consecration of the animal came before the mum, so it was consecrated properly, and then it got this small minor mum, which yes, you don't sacrifice it, but once it's brought, you can leave it up. That was the statement of Rabbi Yochanan. Now we have, let's see if Amr B'chir Barabba fits in over here. I have it in parentheses. No, it's supposed to be Umayder. He goes on. He says Umayder Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva would agree. Ba'ilas nekeva, that if someone tries to bring a sacrifice, an elevation offering, which is called an oila, which is always brought as a male animal, he tries to bring it as a female. Now the rule is that a bird, there's no male or female by the birds when it comes to by kaparis. They try to tell you this is a male, this is a female. Yeah, then you like take the word for it, even though they don't know that really until it starts to crow at 2 a.m. But they guess. I think it has a thing red. Okay, so by birds, when it comes to the offerings, there's no. It doesn't matter if it's a male or a female. So we could say like this: Rabbi Akiva holds that if there's a mum, if there's a blemish, so then if it would have been kosher by a bird, it's also it's after the fact you can leave it on the altar. So maybe we should say the same thing by oilas nekeva. It's kosher by a bird to bring a bird that's a nekeva, a female. So it should be the same thing that after the fact by the animal. We should leave it on. The command the kadamuma like deshadam. We say no, you don't do that because it's as if the mum came before it was consecrated. We said before that if the blemish comes before the consecration, so then it's not, you don't leave it up to you, have to take it off the altar. Masr Rab Zera. Rab Zera has a question. It says, Amala man b'chutz pater. It says, certain
part. The last time around, that's when you said your joke about the Pesach.
Oh, if the Karban Pesach has a thing, has a baby. So, it's a good student. I had one student that he wrote down every joke I said. Nothing.
In the series.
Oh, maybe with Moshe. Yeah. Nothing that I taught. Only the jokes. Anyway, I came home. I told my wife about this. He says, "Oh, that's a good student. That's a good student." Okay. So let's see. Oh yeah. It works like that actually. So sometimes you don't. Your memory works with what you had to say about it, not what. So what you should do when learning is you should always try to come up with something that you say, you comment on it, and that helps you remember your own comments on it more than what the. Anyway, okay. So Reb Zera says, if someone brings up on the outside the temple, he brings up mehen. Mehen is from them. What's them? It's talking about the parts of the sacrifice that are not the main sacrifice. For example, the fetus. He's going to be pater. He's pater. If he brings the fetus up on the outside the temple. Usually you can't bring a sacrifice outside, but this is not the sacrifice. This is the fetus. He burns it outside the temple. It's pater. Hami iman. But if he would bring up from the mother itself, chayiv and be chayiv. 1 second. How's there a mother? How's there a fetus? How did this happen? Must be by less nekeva. Must be it's a female. How is there a fetus? If it's saying that Rabbi Akiva would hold that Elis Nekeva, you can bring it. If it's once it's brought up, you don't take it down, then fine. It's Rabbi Akiva. But if it's according to what you just said, you have to take it down. Hamani, then who could this be that says that you would have a female animal that the mother is out? The mother's being brought outside the temple in Yechayev. But the fetus you bring outside is going to be pater. Ema. Hamal amen b'chutz pater, hameimuri iman chayev. Now, 1 second. I'm missing one point over here. Saying like this. We were thinking that it had to be an oila because the oila, the flesh of the oila is burnt. We said, take the fetus, then you're going to be exempt if you burn the fetus outside the temple. What about the mother itself, which means the flesh itself? Obviously, it's talking about an oila. So no, we're not dealing with a carbon oila, we're dealing with a carbon shlamim. And what we're talking about here is not the mother itself, we're talking about me'emure iman, the organs of the mother. Even in a shlamim, the organs are burnt, even though the flesh is eaten. So it's about if it's a shlamim, then shlamim are brought nekeva, are brought female. So you lose the problem. The whole proof that this was dealing with an oila was because an elevation offering, a burnt offering, was because we were thinking that you were burning the flesh. Yeah, we're saying we're not burning the flesh, we're burning the limbs. But it says from them. It says it says if you bring them up, which is talking about the fetus, and then there would be the contrast to that would be the mother would be the flesh itself. It says if you bring up the limbs of the fetus, the organs of the fetus, you would bring up onto the altar, so you're going to be exempt. But if you bring the organs of the mother, then you're going to be chayiv. But not that there was an oila offering here that would burning the flesh itself. Okay, we have a new Mishnah. In this Mishnah, we've quoted before, and the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. That's the chiddush of this. Let's see if I can do it from here. Okay. It says now, Shachtei al menas lahaniach es damai hayemurav l'machar. Person shechs the carbon and he has intention to place the blood or the limbs the following day. Doesn't have any intention about sprinkling, just about placing. Doesn't have any intention about burning the limbs, the organs. He just has intention of placing it. Or he has intention to take the blood or the limbs outside of the azara. So he's not thinking about a service here. He's just thinking about doing something with it, which would invalidate it. So Rabbi Yehuda Paisel b'chamachshim. Rabbi Yehuda says that that's considered an invalidating thought, and the Chum say that thought is nothing because that wasn't a thought about doing a service in the wrong time. Okay, now it says that Amanas litin al gabi kevesh. He has intention to sprinkle the blood on the ramp instead of on the proper place on the altar. Or he has intention to sprinkle it on the part of the altar that doesn't have the foundation. The blood is supposed to be placed on the two corners, or if it's a chatas, on the four corners. But if he has intention on the two corners that don't have the foundation, there's only one corner without a foundation. That would be the southeastern corner. Doesn't have there's a base that only goes around two sides and covers over the corners on both of them, but leaves the fourth corner out. Okay, or litain esanitano l'mayla esanitano l'mayla, or he has intention to put what's supposed to be go above. He wants to put it below. He has intention to put what's supposed to go below above. Or esanitanim bifnim b'chutz, esanitanim b'chutz bifnim. Or what's supposed to be sprinkled inside the sanctuary, he has intention to put it outside. Or what's supposed to go outside, he has intention to put it inside. Or he has intention, shechlu tmeim, that people the kayanim that are tamei are going to eat the flesh. Or sheakrivu tmeim, or the organs that are put on the mizbeach are going to be brought by kayanim that are tamei. Shechlu arelim, that kayanim that were not circumcised are going to eat from the flesh. Or kayanim that weren't circumcised, why they're not circumcised? Because the brother passed away. from hemophilia. So not because there's something wrong, but they still can't do the service. Or l'shaber atzmais ha-pesach, or he has intention to break the bones of the carbon pesach, which that's a prohibition. Lechol imenu no, but to eat from it on that not cooked, not roasted, not fully roasted. Or he wants to mix the blood of the carbon together with other sacrifices that are invalid. So all of these types of thoughts is kosher. There's only three possibilities of invalidating a sacrifice. Either it's out of the allotted time, out of the allotted place. And the third one is by two sacrifices if he has thoughts that it's the wrong sacrifice. By the Pesach and the Chatas, you have to have intention. Otherwise, all of those, the sacrifice doesn't become invalid.
By the way, this mission is by older generation, Jerusalem.
Right. Yeah. Why do we have to eat the carbon Pesach? Well done. It's interesting because today people don't think like that. Well done means you don't know how to eat meat. Like, you're an amaretz in meat. My time, the Rabbi Yehuda. What's the reason Rabbi Yehuda? Rabbi Yehuda had this concept that even if you have thoughts of just placing it, not sprinkling it, that itself would invalidate. Rabbi Lazar, Rabbi Lazar again. This is Rabbi Lazar that we had before. Rabbi Lazar says there's two psukim. Regarding nicer. One pasuk is referring to the carbon pesach. It says you can't leave over from the pesach until the morning. One pasuk says talking about a carbon taida. It says you can't place it. It also means to leave. It says leisasira means is don't let it be left over. Leyaniach means don't leave it to be left over until the morning. Obviously, we're not talking about that you simply can't leave it and not eat it. So Taneu Leinin Machshavas Hinuach. Then we'll say that what's referring to is thoughts of leaving it. Since we already have one pasuk that says Leisasir Menoad Baika that you can't leave it till the morning, so we already know you can't leave it. So why does the other pasuk say Laniach to leave it? It means you can't have thoughts of leaving it either. Where it says, really? Rabbi Yehuda, Haikra Lach Yehuda Asar. Rabbi Yehuda says that pasuk is telling me that you can't have thoughts of leaving it over. I mean, by like Katani, we have a whole brisa that we learned things from this pasuk, and it's not one of those things. Is not that thoughts of Noach. Brisa says like this: it says B'sar Zevach the Shlam of the flesh of the sacrifice of the Thanksgiving peace offering has to be eaten on its day. And it concludes with Layaniach Mimeno, you can't leave it over till the morning. That's the pasuk we were discussing. So it goes like this. This teaches us that the carbon taida was eaten for one day and the following night. And that was it. Usually a carbon shlamim, a regular shlamim is 2 days with the night in the middle. Carbon taida, because the Abishta wanted that he should invite a lot of guests to tell everyone about the miracle that happened to him. This is a Thanksgiving offering. So he gives them less time to eat it. You have to invite everyone over, like when there's a hurricane and the things, your power goes out. So everything is going bad. So everyone's barbecuing. And they invite you in, like, come, it's all going bad. Just come and eat. So the Taida, they wanted to invite everyone to finish it quickly. Gemara says, the Brisa says, Chalipin, let's say you have another sacrifice that you had in exchange for the carbon taida, or maybe you had an extra one just in case, which also becomes a taida. Bloodais, if it had an offspring, Tmuris, or you actually did exchange it, the Chalipin would be because you lost it, so he doesn't another. Tmura is when you just said, I'm going to bring this one instead of that one, which was a violation, but nevertheless it becomes a taida. Minayan, how do you know that you also have restrictions that it can only be eaten for 1 day and 1 night? Okay, so now I'm learning from different words of this pasuk. So side, that extra, the word tells me that even those other animals also have the same restriction. Chatas v'ashminayin. How do we know that a chatas and a nasham, a sin offering, guilt offering, only have one day and one night? Tamalem zebach. Have an extra word zebach, sacrifice. Nine l'Rabbi Shalmi nazir Shalmi Pesach. How do you know that usually a shlamim is Shalmi nazir Shalmi Pesach? Usually a shlamim is 2 days. But here the Shalmi Pesach, the Chagiga of the 14th, is really has a restriction as well. That also only 1 day and 1 night. Because the Korban Pesach had to be eaten after you were full, right? You don't eat it on the empty stomach. You eat it when you're full. It's a dessert, the Korban Pesach. So what would you fill up on? The Shalmei Chagiga. So that you would eat first. Or the marar. So it says shlamav. That's only 1 day and 1 night. Lachmi taida v'chalas rekikim benazir. What about the breads of the taida, the breads of the nazir minayin? How do you know it's also 1 day and 1 night? Talmud karbanai kulam kairani behem leiniach. And all of them, I say about them that you can't leave it. Okay, so Gemara said, basically what we just did was we said that you can't learn from the pasuk of layaniach that you can't have thoughts of leaving it over because we used that pasuk for something else. As in came lemakra leisisiru, it didn't have to use the word yaniach. It could have said leisisiru like it said by Pesach. Layaniach, my layaniach. Why does it say layaniach? Meaning, it said we're going to learn 2 things from this pasuk. One about leaving it over, and one about thoughts of leaving it over because of the use of the word. That only makes sense. The first thing that Rabbi Yehuda said, that if you want to leave it, it's going to be also a pro. If you leave it, if you have thoughts of leaving it, out of it's a lot of time, it's going to become pigel. But Rabbi Yehuda also mentioned lahaitzi. He said also that if you're going to take it out of the place, that would also be possible. Where does he get that from? Where does he get that from? That even if you're not going to do a service, just take it out of its place, it's also going to become puzzle, not pigel, but puzzle. Another question is, time of the Rabbi Yehuda Svaru. You're quoting to me a pasuk, but we know that really Rabbi Yehuda was just being logical. The Tanya says in a brisa, Rabbi Yehuda says, don't you agree that if you leave it till tomorrow, it's going to be puzzle? So if that's the case, even if he thinks it's just saying that the same way that it would invalidate the sacrifice if you do it, so thoughts of him doing it would also invalidate. You don't need a pasuk for that if it's logical. At the time of the Rabbi Yehuda, rather the reason for Rabbi Yehuda is svara. So we have several questions on Rabbi Yehuda, and what we're going to do now is we're going to go through some other parts of the Mishnah and ask why Rabbi Yehuda doesn't disagree with those as well. Because Rabbi Yehuda just said that if it becomes puzzle, so then thoughts of it would be puzzle as well. It says, V'nifleg nami Rabbi Yehuda b'kulo. Why doesn't Rabbi Yehuda argue on all the other cases, which we're going to go through right now? It says, Behi nifleg. Which one are you expecting him to argue on? It says, B'sheiver atzmei shapesach b'lachem enanah. Zivcha gufeimi mifsal. If this is the logic, it says if someone would, we're asking why doesn't it become invalid if he has thoughts of breaking the bones of the Pesach? It says, well, the reason is simple because if he breaks the bone, it doesn't invalidate the sacrifice; it's just a prohibition, but the sacrifice is still kosher. Maybe what he means is maybe what the Gemara wanted to ask was, so maybe what it thought was that the offering would be brought if he thinks that it's going to be eaten by people that are tamei, or that it's going to be offered onto the altar by people that are tamei. That wouldn't invalidate the sacrifice. It would be a prohibition, but the sacrifice would still be kosher because the blood was already sprinkled properly. Maybe the koyanim that were uncircumcised are going to eat from it. Are they going to offer the organs on the altar? It says once the sacrifice is kosher, it's not going to become invalidated just because someone that wasn't supposed to be there did that. Lishnachrina, there's another version to this last thing. It says kol kaminei. It says that would be impossible anyway. The other koyanim would never allow someone that was tamei or an aral to actually bring it. So that's an impossibility anyway. Now it says la'ariv daman b'dam psulim. He says he's going to mix, if he's thinking to mix the blood of the sacrifice with blood of invalid sacrifice. It says Rabbi Yehuda Tamei Damar Dam Mevatel Dam. This is Rabbi Yehuda's opinion that we learned yesterday, that or 2 days ago, that one type of blood won't nullify the other blood, so it's still going to be kosher, even though the blood is being offered, is being applied, is mixed. Litein asa nitan l'mayla lamata, nitan l'mayla lamata l'mayla. What about that? If he has intentions that he's going to put it in the wrong place on the altar, says, oh, that's also Rabbi Yehuda l'tamei. This is Rabbi Yehuda's opinion. Damar shleilam kaimai nami mekayim krin bay. Even if it's the wrong place on the altar, it's still the altar, and it would still be acceptable. So it won't invalidate the sacrifice. So thoughts about it also won't be a problem. This is a clear pasuk that a sacrifice becomes invalid if you bring the blood inside when it's not supposed to be. Pasuk says, it says any sin offering where you bring the blood inside, you have to burn it. Kasavar Rabbi Yehuda holds the inan makim she'em mishulish b'dam b'basrei murim. We mentioned this earlier, that Rabbi Yehuda holds that when he has thoughts of improper place, it has to be thoughts of a place where the blood, in certain instances, could be applied, where the basar, the flesh, could be eaten, and where the organs are sometimes burnt. Where is that place? Outside of the temple, but in the other areas. In how could you burn outside the temple? Well, during the time when there was a heter of permission to bring on a bama and a private altar, so then you could have that. But the only place that excludes is the heichel, the sanctuary itself. So therefore, the chutzim kaimai doesn't include, thoughts of chutzim kaimai don't include the sanctuary itself. That doesn't. Rabbi Yehuda, does Rabbi Yehuda really hold of this? That it needs to have those three things that have to be applicable. But we have a brisa. Rabbi Yehuda, the pasuk says you can't bring anything that has a mum. The pasuk that talks about it says kol davara, anything that's bad. So it says davara when it says anything that's bad. Ribakan chatas sheshachta b'darim. It's coming to include a chatas that was slaughtered on the south. The chatas is supposed to be slaughtered on the north part of the courtyard, or the chatas nichlas dam lefnim, or a chatas that the blood was placed inside. Which is talking about over here. Even if he thinks about it, tells us that Rabbi Yehuda would say, as Rabbi Yehuda Aimer, Rabbi Yehuda would say, even if he has thoughts of bringing the blood inside, that would invalidate the chatas. And now the Gemara says another issue. The less Rabbi Yehuda Haisvara, and Rabbi Yehuda doesn't have this logic that becomes invalid if it goes inside. Rabbi Yehuda, Yichnes b'shaygig is kosher. Habemezid pasal. If he brings the blood inside unintentionally, so then it's kosher. But if it's on purpose, then it becomes possible. B'kaimalan, we're talking about over there that even b'mezid, that's only b'shakiper. That if it was sprinkled, but just bringing it in would not invalidate. So hashta, now we understand, it comes out, ma hasam yule aile, if he brings in actual blood, he keeper in. If he sprinkles it, keeper means atonement, which means referring to the sprinkle. If he sprinkles it, then it becomes pasul. Ilai keeper ilai. If he doesn't sprinkle it, it doesn't become pasul. Hacha the chashuve, here when he's just thinking about it to bring it in, and not to sprinkle it. The kolskin for sure it's not going to be pasul. So we have contradictions here, what Rabbi Yehuda holds about bringing blood inside the sanctuary. So the Gemara answers, I'll leave it to Rabbi Yehuda. You're right. There's two different versions. Two students have different opinions of what Rabbi Yehuda holds, and that's why we're having these contradictions. Savar Rabbi Yehuda, are they still starting Shachris later?
Yeah.
What time? Is that? Let's see if we can get to the end of the parak. That would be nice.
Go on.
Savar Rabbi Yehuda, we said over here that if it's shechted on the south, it was a prohibition. Rabbi Yehuda holds that chatas sheshachta b'daram yechayev, that he's going to get malchus if he slaughters it on the wrong side of the the wrong side of the courtyard. But Tanya, we have a brayse that says, Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Yochel Chat Shachta B'Darim Yechayev. Could have thought that if someone slaughters the sin offering on the north side, not the north side, it's supposed to be on the north. On the south side, he's going to be Chayev Malkus, Talmud Leimar, Leisizbach, Lashem Alikach, Sharvaseh, Kol Davara. Can't offer a sacrifice with a mum. Davara Temechayvai, Viat Mechayvai, Al Chat Shachta B'Darim. It's going to exclude that only chatas that has a mum. There's going to be malchus, but not if it's slaughtered on the wrong side. You said before that Rabbi Yehuda said that it's chayiv. Here Rabbi Yehuda says that he's not chayiv. He said it's riba, that it's coming to include. I was saying it's coming to exclude. Gemara says, Feitanai alibed Rabbi Yehuda. The same way we answered the last question, that there's different students that have different versions of what Rabbi Yehuda said. Doesn't tell us. Okay, one of the rules of pigul is that it has to be purely pigul. If you mix in other invalidating thoughts, then it doesn't become pigul, and so it won't have the strict laws of karis. Someone eats it. It will be puzzle. It's doubly puzzle, right? But it won't become pigul. Pigul has to be purely pigul. Amar Rababa. Rababa says, Meider Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda would agree. We're talking about Rabbi Yehuda's opinion that if someone has thoughts not to apply the blood, but just to leave the blood till tomorrow. So if someone has those thoughts, Shechizer v'koivay lepigul. If when he actually does the actual service, he already had thoughts of la'aniach, to leave it, which that is itself could make pigul. No, Rabbi Yehuda didn't say that it becomes pigul. Rabbi Yehuda just said that it becomes puzzle. Thoughts of la'aniach, remember? The Mishnah said, Shachta Yamet, Rabbi Yehuda Paiso. Rabbi Yehuda Paiso, but not pigul. Now, if someone has, first he has thoughts of leaving it, lahaniach, leave it, so it invalidates the sacrifice, and then afterwards he has thoughts that he's going to do something that actually would make it pigul. So normally the pigul needs to be purely pigul without any other invalidating thoughts. That if in another part of this the service, the sacrifice, he has thoughts of pigul, that the invalidating thoughts of lahaniach won't mess up the pigul thoughts. Amar Rava is going to bring a proof to Rababa that this is accurate. Teda, I'll prove it to you that the thoughts of hinuach for hiniach, leaving it for Rabbi Yehuda, is not the same like thoughts of chutzim kaimai or other shleila shmai that would invalidate that would mess up the pigul. The pigul of neizrika like lamu says that if someone has thoughts, let's say by the shechita, that he's going to sprinkle the blood outside of its allotted time. Now, is it pigul yet? Well, the rest of the sacrifice needs to be brought. Until the rest of the sacrifice is brought, then you don't say that it's pigul, because pigul needs to be everything is kosher about the sacrifice except for that one thought. So what happens now? So lifnei zrika leklamu, it's not considered pigul because you didn't do the zrika. Zrika is the sprinkling of the blood. Only once you do the zrika, then it will become pigul. So saying like this, that when he has thoughts of sprinkling the blood by the shechita, not really pigul yet until you do the zrika. It only becomes pigul when everything else is done, which means that at that point he has thoughts that only make it pasul, but not actually pigul. So thoughts that make it pasul before the zrika don't mess up the actual pigul. That's what's coming out. So asya zrika v'kavala. Why? Because the zrika comes afterwards. Asya v'kavala pigul. It makes it pigul. So the same thing should apply to the thoughts of leaving the blood before, and then afterwards having thoughts of sprinkling the blood out of the allotted time. The same thing should apply. That later on it will become pigul. Says the Gemara says it's not a proof. Hasam hu chada machshavi, hachatrim machshavus. Over there we said that what did he do? He had one thought to sprinkle the blood out of the allotted time, and it's not pigul yet because you didn't sprinkle the blood. You need to have everything else done. So over there was only one thought, but over here you have two thoughts. You have one thought of leaving it, and then you have another thought of sprinkling the blood. So those two thoughts. One invalidates the other, and it won't become pigul. Esvei Rav Huna l'Rababa. Rav Huna has a question to Rababa. Rababa was the one that says that Rav Yehuda would agree that it still could become pigul, even though he had invalidating thoughts. If he has thoughts to put it in the wrong place on the right day, then the carbon is kosher, according to Rabbi Yehuda, or actually according to everyone. Right? We said that in the Mishnah. If a later part of the sacrifice he has thoughts of eating the flesh outside of its allotted place, then pasul vein bekaris. Then there's no karis, because he messed up the pasul vein bekaris. No, because there was no thoughts of pigul, so there's no karis. Chutz l'zmani. Let's say he has thoughts of pigul in his next the second thoughts. So pigul v'chem karis. We say that it is pigul. Now, l'machar, if his first thought was not, we're going back to the first case. Applying the blood above and it was supposed to be below, or below and it was supposed to be above. If he, instead of having thoughts of doing it immediately, has thoughts of doing it tomorrow, then that's going to be pasul. That's the case. What's going to happen afterwards is if he has thoughts of chutz l'zmani or chutz l'kami afterwards. So once it became already pasul from his first thoughts, why was it only pasul? Oh, it's only pasul by the first thoughts, even though it was chutz l'zmani, because he had thoughts not to sprinkle it but just to leave it, which basically tells us that very clear refutation to Rababa. Because he's saying that if his first thoughts were to leave it for tomorrow, and then he has another thought of actually pigul, of sprinkling the blood tomorrow, or burning the limbs tomorrow, so then it will become it's only going to be pasul. It won't become pigul, which means that Rababa's statement about what Rabbi Yehuda would agree to, that because he's just leaving it, it should still allow pigul, is not correct. But it won't allow pigul. It won't become pigul because we have other invalidating thoughts. What's kasha? It's a question. So tifta. Here it's called tifta. Tifta. The Rababa tifta. It's a strong question on Rababa. The word kasha is a question that we could possibly answer. Kasha, we leave it as a kasha, okay. But tifta means like it's rejected. I'm Rav Chisda Ravina Bar Sila. Rav Chisda says the name of Ravina Bar Sila. While he's doing something for the sacrifice, one of the services, he has intention that a tummy person is going to eat it the following day. It's chayav. Chayav means that the person that actually eats from that is going to be chayav because it became pigul and it's kares. Now, the problem over here is that there's two problems. One is that it's out of the allotted time, the eating of the sacrifice. The second one is the person that's eating it is tummy. Nevertheless, We're not saying that that's an invalidating thought that would mess up the pigel. Amar Rava, Teda. Rava says, I'll prove that Rav Chisda is correct. Rava is his son-in-law, student. Says like this: the flesh before the zrika, you're not allowed to eat it. And when you think about it, that you're going to eat it out of the allotted time, it's mifsal. It becomes puzzle, but it's not pigel yet because you're not allowed to eat it, and it's not pigel because you didn't actually sprinkle the blood. This will be that Rava tried this once before to bring a logic like this. He said this is not a good proof. Hasam zarek umechse. Once you sprinkle the blood, then you can eat it. But over here, you're comparing it to someone that's tamei. Over there, that was a circumstantial thing that you just had to wait. And so we're saying that there was a second problem over there. He's thinking of eating something that you can't eat yet. Yeah, because when you sprinkle it, then you can eat it. Over here, he's tamei. It's never going to be eligible. So it's not a good proof what Rava was saying. I'm Rav Chisda, Margala Bepume, the Rav Dimi Bar Chinna. There was a pearl in the mouth of Rav Dimi Bar Chinna. This is Rav Chisda talking. He says, Rav Dimi Bar Chinna would always say, Basar Pesach Shlei Hutzla. Balach Mei Taida Shlei Hormu. The flesh of a carbon Pesach that wasn't roasted, or the loaves of a carbon Taida that you didn't separate 4 out of the 40 loaves. You're supposed to separate 4 of them and to give them to the kainim. So therefore the owner can't eat it yet. Chayav malei mishum tumah. Nevertheless, if someone is tamei and eats from it, he's chayav. It's actually kares if he eats it when he's tamei. Achila, not touching it, but achila would be kares. Okay. Amar Rava says, Teda, I'll prove it to you. The Tanya was taught in a brisa, even though it's not eligible to be eaten yet because you didn't roast it or you didn't, but nevertheless, someone tell me would invalidate. What's Rava's proof? It says, anyone that eats from the shlamim with his tumah, in his tummy, he gets kares. But it says over there, Asher Hashem, those extra words, which are for Hashem, is extra words. It's coming to include that if he eats things that he's really not supposed to be eating, because it's supposed to go on the altar, but he's tamei, he also gets kares. Alma, and even though it's not eligible to be eaten because it's supposed to be burnt on the altar, but you still have the prohibition of tumah. Even though it's not eligible to be eaten, you still chai because of tumah. Gemara says, Rava again gets rejected. It says, those are eligible to be eaten, but not to be eaten, to be consumed by the mizbeach. And therefore, there's a chiyuv, there's a prohibition with a punishment if he eats it when he's tamei. Lafuke, sar, pesach, over there, it's not eligible to anyone until you actually do something to fix it. Okay, so that's how Rava gets rejected. Okay, he says those have a function, but these don't have any function until it's either roasted or the limbs are, or the loaves are separated. Okay,
Thank you.
Have a good day.
Thank you.
Good day.